Thank you. I'd like to move on to next sessions. Session 1. I'd like to invite the moderators and speakers to come forward to the stage. I'd like to introduce our moderators, who is Young-Suk Jo. She's chair of the International Solidarity Center of the Korean Women's Association United. Please welcome.
Okay, thank you for welcoming. Because it's a women's session always, when you talk about the survivors and victims issues, we rather to be concerned whether their security is still there or not, always. So in this session, we'd like to have those principles. Yeah. So two of our speakers are concerned of their security in their own, living place, and the one, brave, speakers can come in front. So, okay. So let me invite three of, our speakers. Please come front, and then please keep in mind the camera should be cautious for the two speakers when they. Yeah. Okay. Good. Okay. Yes. Please be seated. Okay, my name is Young-Suk Jo. I'm a chair, as Kinam already mentioned, of the International Solidarity Center of Korea Women's Associations United. It's an umbrella, women's movement organization. We've been working for the so-called comfort of women's issues. We raised all the issues, work, together. All the women's, groups in Korea actually work together and, try to, fix this, situation. So I'm very much, happy to meet three of our, very precious, speakers from they live in, different places. Yasmin, you live in Canada, and the Swang Nang, you live in Thailand, and the Nao Mei U, you live in, Thailand as well. But you've been, working for the minority women's issue in your own, ethnic groups. So at the beginning, we invite, Ms. Yasmin Ullah, director of Rohingya Human Rights Network, as well as coordinator of Free Rohingya Coalitions. She is based in Canada. Because we only have 1 hour, so each speakers have only 15 minutes. After that, we will open the floor for 15 minutes, question and answer and feedback sessions. So please, welcome the Ms. Yasmin Ullah for the first, speakers. Yes.
Good morning, everyone. Before I begin talking about the prepared remarks and what I think of the sexual violence and mass rape and genocide of the Rohingya people and Rohingya women specifically, the theme of what today we will be discussing on is very much, something that we live through on the daily basis, regardless of whether or not we've been victimized by the sexual violence itself. I remember just earlier this year that my dad was basically having, the talk with me and sort of told me that he was really proud of what I've been able to do and what I'm trying to do. He ended it with the reality that he was so glad that in 1995 we moved to Thailand, even though we were persecuted as a stateless, and refugee for the longest time in Thailand as well. But the fact that I wasn't one of those women who would be raped by the military men was was something that he thought, it was an accomplishment that he had been able to do to prevent me from having to be one of those victims. And I live with that every day. But the fact that I was fortunate doesn't exempt me from the fact that trauma lived through us. And I wanted to retrace back, to the history of what the women in my family had gone through in order for me to be here talking to you today. My grandmother in 1942, when she was 13, had left to go and play with her younger brother who was 8. And without them knowing, the village was being pillaged. And the entire family was wiped out, including her parents. So as young kids, they fled to a nearby city. They were from Choctaw, and they moved to my hometown where I was born. And that was, they were living in a poor, horrid conditions as young kids, and my grandmother was never able to redeem herself. In 1995, after a lifelong struggle, to try and be educated, my mother decided that Burma was not the place for her to actually be able to, again, redeem herself or, improve her livelihood. She decided that that was not the place for women to thrive, and she did not want me to end up like her, being married at a young age because parents were not able to protect their own daughters because of the persecution by the military. So they look for ways to protect women, but that was the only way they know how. And that was the only way to do so. So at the age of 21, my mother decided that was it. She was not going to take any more of this. And since genocide was looming since then, she decided to take me, a toddler, in her arm and boarded the military ship full of men that was ready to take advantage of her. And she had told me this painfully just a couple of years ago, that this happened to her. And I imagined how long she had to live with that kind of reality within her, that she had to struggle at a very young age. 21 is barely, a legal age for drinking in many countries. But she had to decide that was the best. And she was hoping that the new land would be more prosperous and more forgiving than the one that she had left. She had a clear vision of what she wanted, and she was already defying all the normalcy of Rohingya women. She'd hoped that I would be able to at least be educated, be able to read, be able to write, be able to live, through my life and not having to worry that I would have to be married off at 15. So over 2 decades have passed. The stories of Rohingya women remain the same. We flee and flee and flee, and we look for ways to survive. And this is the man's world, if we really look into it. We live in a patriarchal society where all of the system and everything that we breathe and live through is set up for women to fail. Growing up as a refugee and being unwelcomed, unfortunately, in that new land, in Thailand, I faced a lot of discriminations. And of course, there's nothing, to be compared to the kind of xenophobia and the kind of discrimination and genocide that my people have gone through within Myanmar, and majority of my family are still back home. It's still the kind of trauma, the kind of degeneration of your existence as yourself. And because most countries in Asia hold on to these very xenocentric and xenophobic views, we were, as we were trying to navigate the lives as refugees and stateless people, and living in poverty itself, I had all the worst combinations of inferiority combined. The sexual assaults and harassment that I've experienced as a woman, and all of the women have gone through this at one point or another in their lifetime. A lot of those was much harder to process, and a lot of those incidents passed me by. The rage would build up in in myself, and I would not be able to seek any justice or have the tool to hold the perpetrators accountable. And as a girl, dealing with that kind of degradation of my sense of self was always tied with the fact that as a person, I don't exist in this world. I don't really exist anywhere. There was no name of me on the registration of the government anywhere at that point. And I had to live in hiding. And every checkpoint, every police post, that was it. I was always tense and scared. And that was the kind of experience that a lot of my fellow Rohingya women have had to go through all of their lives. So much later in my life that I realized and was able to trace a straight line from the loss that my grandmothers have had to go through, and the trauma of being in exile, from my father, and the threat of genocide, and the fact that my mother had to risk it all to board that ship at one time from Sittwe to Yangon in order for us to be trafficked into Thailand. All of those have a direct impact on me, unbeknownst to myself. And it was the continuation of oppression that doesn't end even after we've left Burma. I continue to internalize the helplessness and inferiority because it was passed down to me and there was no other way of existing. The military succeeded in dehumanizing me, in dehumanizing so many other Rohingyas, long after we've left our own homeland. And rape has always been used as a weapon of war. Thousands of Rohingya women reportedly were raped by the Burmese military, with the numbers and the research by Doctors Without Borders found that girls as young as 9 was gang raped. A study done by Ron Arsenio on risk factors of rape and physical assault and post-traumatic stress disorder in women found that past victimization increases the risk of rape and physical assaults, that women struggling with mental illness, specifically depression, may lack the motivation, resources, or skills to extract themselves out of physically assaultive situations. This is one of the risk factors for further sexual exploitation of Rohingya women. Sex trafficking and gender-based violence are taking place at the camps to this day. This is true in the Rohingya women's case, specifically the rape and sexual assault survivors who are ostracized by their own families for no fault of their own. The socialization of women that her worth relies on the chastity alienates the set of women automatically. According to Linda Bennett, rape is used with the objective not just destruction, but also total humiliation, effectively demoralizing and undermining the solidarity within the victimized groups with long-term effect. And furthermore, there were many unreported rape and sexual violence cases that further barricades women from and isolates them socially. Once the social bonds are severed, we all know that, because there's no clear way to escape from such situations, these women would then think or, practice the retreatism, because that was the only option available for them as a coping mechanism. So I would not be surprised if the PTSD or post-traumatic stress disorder becomes this huge, large-scale health crisis in the refugee camps in the near future. it shouldn't be a surprise to us that women experiencing the extremes of cruelty when the world itself is built by patriarchy. We live and breathe the system that sets women for failure. And when women are used as a tool to inject the fear deeper into the community, it should not surprise us as well. This is a century-old tactic to indoctrinate submission and the helplessness that is detrimental to the existence of the community as a whole. Mass rape is deployed to do exactly this, incapacitating the community from any further type of agencies for decades to come, and it's an ancient tool to power control. Why women suffer such a depth of persecution should not be shocking. It starts early on with our socialization of women, of what is normal in terms of gender roles. Hence the rule of patriarchy. Women are supposed to just be nurturers and hold certain jobs that are, by the product of feminization, and only raise children. These are examples of rampant ideas and problematic statement that's still around till today. And it's a starting point for many oppressive views on women. So the society ensures that women are painted as problematic in households, in workplace, and in the society for wanting equity. And we are called hysterical when we call for justice and ask for the disparity to be resolved. And we have been socialized to become half of a man or his honor. Culture after culture glorifies women as, or the idea rather, that women are valuable gems to be protected, which indirectly frame women as men's commodity. Karl Marx points out that the conflict theory, that within a society, people would always fight over the power to control resources. And this is something much deeper than, something that has been always problematic in the society. It is how we, because most of the resources are being controlled by, unfortunately, men, and men in power and patriarchal system. There is something problematic that lies within the society that links masculinity with aggression. And in this case, the military who perpetrated this crime of sexual violence and mass rape and genocidal rape, as an institution, it's heavily dependent on the manipulated view of masculinity and its refusal to align with any traits that is associated with femininity. This made it easier for them to conduct the operation that devalue women, especially those who have been framed as inferior and lesser than, like Rohingya women. In Rape in Contemporary Warfare by Sarah Meager, she suggests that there needs to be a careful examination of macro structural processes of globalization, particularly international competition for scarce resources, making the connection that the military and armed groups are motivated by personal or economic gains. Because sexual violence is an effective weapon of terror and dispersal, which facilitates the pursuit, in this case, of the military economic goals. Patriarchal capitalist corporates control much of the resources that are available in and around the world. And changing from patriarchal elites in control will not only be damaging to the current status quo, meaning that the priority to pillage the earth to make the most profit would change, but it would shift the narratives prevalent today. In case you aren't aware of the narratives created by and perpetuated by the men in power, think about wars, eugenicism, or, in other words, the forcible sterilization of people that they decree as feeble-minded, disabled, xenophobia, homophobia, racism, genocide, and the list goes on. Any atrocity that comes and threaten the insecurity over their statuses and firm grasp of the resources becomes problematic. So the purpose of educating yourself on this issue or other issues that face humanity today isn't to overwhelm you or upset you for a short-lived moment. It is for you to use a sociological imagination to trace the problems, personal problems, back to the system that creates them. Our responsibility over one another is to ask the right question: who benefits from our misery? Who rely on our hate and fear of one another to make profits? Industry that continues their business ties with Burmese military essentially sends the message out to the world and my people that have been raped and tortured and killed and forced out of homes and in so many other ways, suffering, that their profits is more important than our lives. So not only do these companies care very little about human rights, they would rather side with the genocide commanders and genocidal regime, where there is a clear reason to pull out of Burma and cut the stream of wealth that goes into funding the military. So corporate greeds and culture of violence and intimidation are just caused by the pursuit of wealth and greed itself from the military. And wars are not caused by the widespread of poverty or failure of development, but by local and regional power elites who seek to maintain the networks of patronage. This was said by Martha Thompson. Now, institutions, specifically the ones that deals with human rights, have also been caught up in similar cycle of oppressive practices, knowingly or unknowingly. Refugees and humanitarian crisis have become a source of profit in a way. And the reasons that we continue to come together and still fail to resolve most of this is because there's too much to lose. If the refugee crisis or the problems or wars or conflict are solved. So the problem that lies within the human rights sector as well is that there is a lack of representation, a proper, appropriate representation from the victims and from the survivors themselves. I'm not talking about one or two refugees at the table. I'm talking about having refugees, civil society, or having the survivors at the table at each of these meetings. We saw the failure of this in the bilateral agreement between Bangladesh and Burma to repatriate Rohingya. And the UN Security Council passed the resolution in 2008 and 2009 acknowledging that sexual violence is a tactic of war, as well as emphasized that the states share duty to end impunity for sexual violence. The same UN Security Council had been timid, to put it lightly, in furthering its own call to actions when the evidence of sexual violence and mass rape against Rohingya women are presented. And so we're gathered here today. There are also thousands of Rohingya family at the camps dreading the consequences of this bilateral agreement, that they were selected, and apart from not having any appropriate measures of reparation set in place, meaning the full restitution of lands, homes, wealth, and any other losses, and the reinstatement of Rohingya citizenship, the perpetrators remain in power. This includes the military who attacked them back in 2017. So, because we're running out of time, I want to end with a call to action. And this extends beyond this room, I'm sure. As Rohingya, this is widely accepted and very universal amongst us, that we do not want repatriation, or rather forced repatriation, unless there is reparation set in place. We don't want to go back to the same situations that have caused us to have to leave in the first place. And the persecution of the military as an institution, not only by ICC, but also Myanmar as a state by ICJ, should be held responsible for genocide of my people and the mass atrocity against other ethnic nationalities. We need to also think about holding corporate worlds accountable for what it has done, for the misery that it has caused. There should be no place in this world for the capitalist regime to be able to control power and control resources over people's lives. There should be no space for them in the world, for them to be able to cause the genocide to take place, perpetuates the genocide, maintain it, and then come out to the world and say, hey, look at how much profits we made last year. This should be in no way acceptable. And because we're gathered here today, we talk about the importance of putting victims first, putting survivors first. We need to look at what is actually keeping these people victimized and keeping many other people to come, unfortunately, falling victims for these sort of resources and profit driven type of corporates. And so I would like to end here, and thank you for your attention.
Thank you. Wow, thank you, Yasmin. You give us a comprehensive, very much complex issues. It's a comprehensive pictures we have. So, but next, speakers, Mrs. Sang Wang, Shan Women Action Network. We call them as a SWAN. In Asia Pacific region, we know SWAN is very much, well known, very active, networks for talking about the minority, ethnic minority groups issues. So are you using? Okay. So you're using the PPT, presentation. So let us, invite Ms. Sang. So she's gonna use the PPT presentation. Okay. So you also have only 15 minutes.
Sorry. Yes, I will be talking about the system of impunity in Shan State and also from the other ethnic states in Burma. So women in Burma are facing violence at every level, not only because of historical gender discrimination as a direct result of militarization and the lack of rule of law. Rape and sexual violence committed by state actors, state armed forces and authorities are occurring in Burma since the conflict started between Burman-dominated government, successive military regimes, and the ethnic armed group. The civil war has been going on for more than 70 years. Excuse me. Sorry. Oh, okay. So 17 years ago, my organization, the Shan Women's Action Network, and the Shan Human Rights Foundation documented the report called License to Rape, which documented 173 incidents of rape and involving 625 girls and women committed by Burma Army troops in Shan State, mostly between 1996 and 2001. The report gives clear evidence that the rape is used as a weapon of war against the civilians' populations in Shan State. So in this report, 83% of the rapes were committed by officers, in most cases in front of their troops. 61% were gang rape, 25% of the rape resulted in death. So after this, after this report, there were more reports by different ethnic women's organizations on using rape as a weapon of war. So report from Karen State, that was in April 2004, and now sexual violence by the regime's troop against the women in Karen State. Shattering Silences was published by the women from Karen State, Karen women's organizations. So again, this is 50%, half of the rape were committed by the high-ranking officer. So another report from one state, Catwalk to the Barracks, by the Human Rights Organization from one state, the sexual slavery and other practices of sexual violence by troops of the Burma military regime in Mon area. So this report also clearly documented that the troop conscriptions scores of what they call these comfort women from nearby villages who were forced to work for their troops by the day and forced into sexual slavery at night. Also forcing 30 women, including schoolgirls, to stay at their base and take part in the military fashion and beauty show involving sexual molestation. So report from, so this is the report from one state. Another report, Unsafe State, which was published in 2007, that this report was released by the Women's League of Chinland, is the first to provide detailed evidence of the systematic sexual violence being committed by the Burma Army soldiers in the isolated mountains region of the Chin State in the Western Burma. So the cases were documented in the period of 1989 to 2006. So in this report, the girl as young as 12 were being raped in their homes and farms, and while they are going to their farm and also traveling to work as a forced labor. That was also conscripted by the military regime then. So women's group and human rights groups from Burma have been continuously documenting and exposing the sexual violence against women and girls from Shan, Kachin, Chin, Karen, Mon, Karenni, and Rakhine State through a number of reports, particularly since 2002. So, and then again, as we said, the continuous report keep coming out because it's keep the systematic use of rape are still keep on happening. So this is another report by the Women's League of Burma, System of Impunity, which document detailed account of sexual violence against women in all ethnic areas, ethnic state, and as well as the central area of Burma. These stories demonstrate patterns of widespread and systematic human rights violations being perpetrated by the regime's armed forces and authorities. Women and girls from different ethnic groups reported similar story of rape, including gang rape, rape and murder, sexual slavery, and forced marriage. Significantly, almost all the incidents took place during the year 2003 and 2004. Precisely why the regime has been repeatedly denying the military rape in Burma. So these are the map from the report. Then again, so Women of Burma put up this shadow report to present to the CEDAW committee. That was in 2008. So also mention the charts and the detail of different reports and different incidents happened throughout Burma. Again, not ending. In January 2014, so Women's League of Burma released a report called Same Impunity, Same Patterns. So these cases are collected by the member of the Women's League of Burma, which my organization is also one of the founding member of the Women's League. So most cases involving the 10 women have been raped by this soldier of Burma army, from the election to end of 2003. So most cases are linked to the military offensive. So here, I think my colleague Normay U will highlight and elaborate more about the link of this military offensive against the people in Burma. So another point I like to make is sign of systematic policies. So cases are documented across the many different geographical area. Cases involve many different battalions of Burma Army. Crimes are committed with frequency in periods of ongoing conflict. Many cases, such as gang rape, are of a collective nature. So the aggravated nature of sexual violence cases is part of the wider use of torture in offensive strategies. So sexual violence is perpetrated by high-ranking officers, institutionalizing its acceptance as a valid practice. So due to no cases of rape were unpunished, soldiers behave that they have authority to do so. So impunity for the military. So one major issue is in the inability to hold military perpetrators of sexual violence accountable for their crimes. Such barriers are officials, including constitutional provisions granting the military complete control over military justice, as well as informer, such as fear and coercion. So recently, the Independent International Facts-Finding Mission on Myanmar report on sexual and gender-based violence in Myanmar is just released, and that also mentioned that impunity and the accountability there. So it's another, there are many references. So the way the military treat people here, this is, I would like to mention this case. Two ethnic Kachin teachers were raped and killed. They're 20-year-old volunteers working with the Kachin Baptist Conventions. That happened in Kotkai's Gongka village on January 19, 2015. So local residents said that claim or accused the army as Gongka was occupied by the soldiers from the Burma Army Infantry Battalion 503 at the time of the murder. Of course, the military response through media and through talk to the people, statement that even the military chief, senior general, Mae Aung Hlaing, claimed that the army has nothing to do with the rape, murder, two volunteer teachers in 2015. And also said that the army chief also rejected other accusation against the Tamador and said it would have strong evidence, it has a strong evidence against those accusations. So in their statement also said the military would take action based on the rule of law against those who accuse soldiers. So the high percentage of the victims or survivors are young girls, so therefore they are easily intimidated by such a threat from the military. So another issue is also this, the military is a powerful and play a big role, powerful role in society and politics. So in this long way to go, another CEDAW shadow report by the Women's League of Burma also stated in there is that the impunity guaranteed by the 2008 Constitution. So that's a charge from the state. There are underage girls and over 50s were among the rape survivors or rape victims. So these are the areas. So these are the same pattern, the same community. This is only in the 2010 after the election to 2015. So after this new government and then up to 2015. So as young as 8 years old was raped. So another human rights violations, a case updated by the Shan Human Rights Foundation in April 2018. There was the brutal rape and slashing of 73-year-old women by Burma Army soldiers in Mung Piak on April 2nd, 2018, which highlights the vulnerability of women in militarized area in Burma. And this is, in this case, is Eastern Shan State. So again, my colleagues may will elaborate more, this ceasefire, peace process, and then continues of impunity. So this is the latest case that one of Women's League of Burma's member organization, the Ta'ang Women's Organization, and the other civil society groups also highlighted this issue and asking, demanding justice from the military. So even the village headmen made the complaint to Burma Army Commander Yemin. Only the investigation in the battalion 258, but the other 2 battalions which was involved in this rape case were not investigated, or no other legal action against the perpetrator. So right now the situation is that the survivor dare not live in her own village because she is afraid of the soldiers that are still at large. So License to Rape and other reports gave clear evidence that systematically using rape as a weapon of war against the women in ethnic area to control, terrorize, subjugate population, or uprooting ethnic people, and to exploit the resource-rich ethnic states, which already, the professor also already mentioned that, these resources are from the ethnic states as well. So the Burma military regime has committed war crimes and crimes against humanity in the form of sexual violence against women. So decades ago, Women's League of Burma released this report, System of Impunity. But today, you know, these women of Burma are still facing the same impunity, the same patterns. So unless and until the military is reformed and placed under the rule of law, sexual abuse against ethnic women will not stop. So if this vital change does not take place, the same impunity and the same pattern will continue to resonate for the year to come. So this is a sad story, and even though we try to find the solution up to today and we haven't found, so unfortunately that all our member organization of the Women's League or other organizations still keep on documenting this impunity over sexual violence. So, thank you.
So Ms. Sang Nuang, she's describing, huge, cases of the gang rapes and, violence against women, but still, impunity. There is no accountability, is there? So now I'm inviting Ms. May U, advisor to the Karen National Unions based in Thailand. So you have, 15 minutes.
Okay, thank you very much. Listening to everything being said this morning reminds me of having read the book by Vietnamese author Pulitzer Prize winners who said that every wars are fought twice, and first time in the battlefield and second time in the memory. And I would like to add that the one that is being fought in the memory doesn't end. It continues, and that's, I think, it is what is unfolding in this room. As for introduction, because this is the conference, the title of the conference says genocide. Genocide is the word that sent me back to graduate school, the law school, in fact, in 2004. And it is the word that boldly differentiates activists like Zani from other activists, because since very early times, very early days of our activism, Zani said that what the ethnic minorities are undergoing under the Burmese military regime or successive Burmese governments at the time was genocide by the slow death. And I think that kind of drew a line between him and other activists. And it is also the word that divided me from many of my fellow activists too, who were otherwise very passionate about promoting democracies in Burma. And I realized that those of us who consider ourselves democracy promoters of democracy or Democrats, we are too proud to admit that it was the democratic regime in Nazi Germany that committed the genocide. It's the democratic government, democratically elected parliamentarian government in Myanmar that sent Burmese military troops to occupy Shan State and never leave since then. And it was democratic government that, of that time, parliamentarian government of that time, that brought in military rule to Burma because it was the tendency of the Burmese politics, the tendency in Burmese politics that rely on military. So that's the introduction. So but then Professor Yang Hee Lee had elaborated quite detail on systematically. So I think it's it's very helpful for all of us. So I will try to be efficient in my time slot. Rape, and thank you to Yasmin for laying the ground on the patriarchal and rape and from sociology perspective, because I think it's inevitable that we will have to look at it from, especially when we look at the current case in Burma, because rape as a weapon of wars did not begin just in 2016 in Myanmar. It's in 1949 when the Karen broke out and started the armed revolution. It was in Rangoon, in the capital of Myanmar, that the Burmese military raped women in their own homes as the Karen revolved, started demanding equality. So it started with that kind of history in Myanmar. Rape in Myanmar society, I think it's necessary for us to understand it from a broader perspective. And it only became one of the favorite weapons of the military because it's readily available in the society that we live in. And civil war, we talked about. We are looking into 70 years of events unfolding themselves. And we have, like many countries in the world, our country has a very ugly history. In the 70s, I think it was in the 70s that the four cuts policy was introduced by the Burmese government at that time. Rape and sexual violence against women became one of the favorite weapons because it's effective. It's effective in many ways. It's trying to kill. It's like trying to kill many birds with one stone. So it's humiliating, fear, intimidating, Burmanization, and ultimately that's how it leads to genocide. Huh? So I think if we Sang-Nong and I talked about, we were talking about before preparing our remarks here, and we did not know how to conclude this because such a situation, the system, domestic system, national system, it's hopeless, right? And then you look at the international system, and we heard enough this morning. So when we prepared these remarks, we did not know what we could possibly expect, how do we move forward. We talked about that, and we thought, and I texted Zani and I said we did not have conclusion. And Sang-Nong, in the slides, you can see the list of reports produced by women's groups in Myanmar. Some groups are based along the Thai-Burma border. Some groups are now in Myanmar proper under the government. All these reports stated they have common characteristics. It's militarization, rapes and sexual violence committed or orchestrated by the state or state institutions. all the same. And so I just to add more, just to make it more complicated, currently in Myanmar, as we speak, war is effectively going on. Right, the military is waging war against the ethnic minorities, especially on the western border and on the northeast border. And war effectively going on, and along with the war, there is an infamous peace process, right? So I think it's kind of ironic, but then people like to tell me, my colleagues in the peace process like to tell me that it's normal. It's normal when you negotiate for peace, fightings, there will be some fightings, there will be some clashes. It's normal, but I think it's tragic that we see it as normal. We take it as normal, and so it's hard to get out of this cycle. War is normal, fighting is normal, and then everything that happens during the war becomes normal. Rape, torture, killing, blah, blah, all these things. So the peace process, and I thought with all other informations have been shared, and these reports that Sanang included in the slides, most of these reports, if not all, are available online. So if for researchers, for students, I think it would be useful if you look at these reports. But I like to focus my remarks on the peace process and how it also contributes to the impediment. One of the reports that are now highlighted from the Moon State by the Moon women's organizations, that those incidents, those cases happen after the New Moon State Party signed the ceasefire agreement with the government. And so I like to highlight that the agreements, the kinds of ceasefire agreements. So since 1995, so after 1995, do we say after or 1995 and forward? The 95, so 97, 98, 99 to 2015, the nationwide ceasefire agreement was signed finally. The Kachin signed ceasefire agreement, the Moon signed ceasefire agreement. And what these, one would expect that with the ceasefire agreements being signed, issues and problems would be addressed. But that, if you read the agreements do not address any of those issues. The agreements do not address the issues, and therefore the agreements do not contain any mechanism whatsoever for the issues to be addressed properly. So I think it's important to note international community was more than excited to embrace the government when the Burmese government opened arms and invited the ethnic minorities to come and negotiate for peace and sign this ceasefire, so on and so forth. We all were excited, right? Because it was a long time war being fought, and many people died, many people had been displaced. So when the government agreed to have talk, everybody got excited. But we did not, I think the experience so far has taught us a few lessons. And one of the lessons said to critically look into the agreements being signed, because it depends on the agreements we signed. We will be able to, we can tell whether we will be able to move forward, or we are going to go around the circle. And in Burma, the kinds of agreement we sign allow us to move, but to move in a cycle like this, in the circle, not necessarily move forward. And the New Moon State Party signed the ceasefire agreement, and the rapes and the sexual violence committed by military troops, the state military troops, continue. The Kachin signed ceasefire agreement 17 years after. Rapes and other sexual violence continue, same as before, conducted, orchestrated by military troops. And right now, the impact, another impact we note the women organizations have recorded and would soon be published is people, many more, even more unreported rape cases or sexual violence cases and violence committed by the troops, the military, because right now the peace process is ongoing. The government and the ethnic armed organizations are in talks. So regardless of the kind of agreements being signed, people, and actually because of specifically the kind of agreements being signed, that did not specify, that did not include, that did not address the issues, the pressing issues. The ordinary people who experience violations do not know where to put complaints, where to file cases, whether they could file complaints. So with all these things going on, very confusing situation. Korean women's organizations have collected data, more unreported rape cases in the region, in the ceasefire region. And saying ceasefire region is also problematic because ceasefire region, there is no legally agreed ceasefire region. So it's very vague and it gets more complicated. It makes it even more challenging for the people because of this type of ceasefire agreements. So I think, having said that, I just would like to remind all of us that ceasefire agreements are necessary for peace process to start taking place. But depends on the type of ceasefire agreements, we will be able to move forward or will be moved in the circle and not getting anywhere, repeating the same things. And that the latter one is what is happening in Myanmar right now. And I think as people who care about Burma and the people of Burma, we care about Burma and we want to address it. We believe that we need to address the problems. But if we get excited by the peace process, if we get excited by the ceasefire agreements, how many ceasefire agreements being signed by how many groups, we will miss the real opportunity to actually move the country forward, because the peace process, we are talking to the very people who are violating, committing all these crimes. And in the talks, if we do not address, in the agreements, if we do not address all these, because we are talking and we have to face it, we have to be face-saving and so on and so forth, then we allow this to happen even with more impunity, right? So I think this is, I have no solution, I have no recommendation. I just think that we have to add into the problems that we have, that ceasefire agreements, peace process, it is more challenging for the people on the ground. Thank you.
Thank you so much. We've been heard about the militarism and patriarchies and the imperialism and colonialism and capitalism. All the issues actually affect differently with women, especially in a fragile situation, such as, just like all the minority women who live in those areas, the triangle, region. So, and we heard about the lack of, lack of punity. So there's an impunity issue still there. So no accountability. And the problem is if you reflect the Korean case, the so-called conflict women's issues, it's taken more than 50 years to raise the conflict women's issues. Is officially, official issue in between the Korea and Japan. So when with after colonialism, since the 1965, the Korea and Japan restart the negotiation of the reconciliation. So, but the conflict of women's issues in Korea, it takes more than 40, 50 years. Still, it's ongoing, because of during the ceasefire and during the peace negotiation, the conflict of women's issues were not been there. So I think it's the same, because we learn from our history. We have so many lessons. But if you not actually clearly acknowledge and clearly solve these issues, so the same issues as what we done before, the same mistakes and same failures will be repeated, what you mentioned. So unfortunately, we just have let me check how long we can open this floor, because we are now 25. The lunch will be closed 10 minutes only. So we have 10 minutes for the question and answer session and reflection sessions. So we're gonna have 3 questions, and then please mention your name and designate to whom you are asking for. If you have a question for all, then as well you can mention. So please raise your hand. So I have 2, 3 hands here. So 4 hands. So I think the 4 hands would be enough for 10 minutes. So here's Mr. Come first, and second you, and third you, and 4. Yes.
Yeah, I already introduced. My name is John.
Okay.
I'm also a Burmese and a Christian, an ethnic minority. I will refer to all of you. In the case of Burma, rape is right now is ongoing civil war. So it is a wartime rape case. So that is similar to during Korea-Japanese war time. So that is wartime rape case. But nowadays in Korea, there is no civil war. It's peacetime in Korea. So it's different in Korea and different in Myanmar nowadays. So this is clarification. And second thing is, as I told you, we need a structure problem in Myanmar, because of we have an ethnic minority. We have to build we have to fix up proper structure. Until nation building is fixed up proper structure, all this crime, human rights violation will happen. So this is the only solution. We should fix up structure. All these ethnic minority and armed groups to effort, including ceasefire. I don't know detail, because just ceasefire is not enough. We have to fix up all direction to the structure fix up. So this is our future goal, to be a good nation building. Once our nation is built up, and once economy is grow up, all this social system will also change. A lot of violation will also decline. So this is my suggestion, my comment. And we need a lot of expert and scholar researcher for many ethnic groups and many Myanmar stakeholders, because we are lack of those things. We have to do it. Thank you.
Okay, this question. So, Miss, with computer, yeah.
Sorry. Hi, I'm Harim Lee, and I'm working at KCOC as an intern. First of all, thank you for all your wonderful presentations. I want to ask one question to the first speaker. Excuse me. I think one of the key ideas of your speech is that survivor-centered approach. I do agree with your opinion that we should include the survivors or the victims in reparation process discussions or any conference or etc. But considering the case of comfort women in Korea, the reparation process is not automatically carried out respecting survivors' opinions. So I'm just wondering your opinion about any specific way to ensure these survivors or victims' opinions in the process. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, James from Asia Center. I wanted to ask the colleagues, especially those based in Thailand, has there been any engagement with the ASEAN Commission on Women and Children? Any experience, or what are your thoughts around that?
Later. The final question.
Michimi Muranoshi, Gakushin University, Tokyo. My question is, to what extent do the military men or ex-military men in Myanmar speak up? To what extent do they confess? Or to what extent do they accuse somebody else from inside? It seems to me that the reason I ask this is it's very, very interesting that so many military men must know what happens. And so many people know that people in power are lying, but the government still continues.
Okay, those questions you can, agree, all can. So the questions, so the first questions, I think is the response from the speakers would be needed. And second question goes to Yasmin, and, the third question goes to Mel, and then the last question comes to all, I think. Okay, let's start from, please, who's gonna start to respond? Yeah.
The very first gentleman, I think I take it as a comment, so I will not further comment on the comments. But the question, ASEAN, from as far as I know, only the government's representative, as we speak now, the ASEAN Women, 1325 ASEAN women's groups are meeting on 1325 something, UN 1325 resolution right now, and government sent 3 women representatives, 3 parliamentarians to there. But ASEAN, as we know from my experience, I think have been very, not very open, friendly to non-state, but some of our colleagues try to participate, have been trying to participate. But for me, and as far as I know for Sana, we do not have anything, any communication. Regarding the military, if the ex-military officers ever admitted, and I also, I don't want to be, because I am currently participating in the peace process, the former peace process, and every now and then meet with the government representative in negotiations, so on and so forth. I do not want to be directly quoted, but that was told to me, so I think I still could not believe what I heard. The former general, one of the former generals leading the peace process, initiating the peace process, told this to us at a dinner table, that when he was a battalion commander, how they participated in impregnating a mentally ill woman. And he said it in a joke, as a joke, and everybody laughed. So if we called it confession, that was one. And by the very high-ranking general who initiated and was leading the peace process. So, and then he said no one admitted. There were about 20 men, and no one admitted. Therefore, all of them were punished. And how they were punished? Their salary was, they were fined financially. They were fined. They got their salaries cut to support the woman. So I think that's the attitude. That's the attitude of the guys the men in the military. And recently, rape. And I think that the reason I said in Burma we have to look at rape as society at large. What the cases right now, so many cases on daily basis coming out, not necessarily in conflict areas, but in the cities, and that's the attitude of the people. People are crying out. We need to do something. We need to do something, and the parliament is trying to propose a bill to address the law. And military representative in the parliament stood up and said, "Rape is a normal thing. We do not have to blah 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 blah." So all these things, I think you can go back to dig out, and that information became public. His speech, his remark in the parliament became published. That is very telling of the attitude of the men in the military men. So they would not come up and I don't know what kind of confession we expect, but those were, to us, confession. They just say it.
Okay. Confession, there are a few, but not officially like issuing a statement or telling to the media kind of straightforward ways. But I met deserters from Burma Army, and they definitely mentioned that their officer was bragging about how many women in the ethnic area he had raped or things like that during their evening or talk or things like that. So that is something that we have recorded, those interviews that we made with the deserters from the Burma Army. That was several years ago. So, but that is still the valid information that some people within the Burma Army had said that. And another case was, I don't remember the name of the documentary, but it was about a former Burma Army, maybe junior officer, I think, Nit Dang Lop's document. Sorry, I don't remember now, but he also mentioned that there's something that he knew about and that's happened within the military. So that's another case. And another case is sadly, I don't remember the amount of money the military personnel, they came to a young child who was raped by the army soldiers. He came with a very little amount of money, but not so big, and a teddy bear. So that is admitting that he did rape that very young girl in a village. So those are I'm sure this is my own story. I'm sure other people from different areas also must have had a similar stories that I have. So.
To address your question first, when you look at a human being subpar or consider them lesser than, there is no need to confess. There's no need to process anything. There's no need to even address them as humans in the first place. So the kind of confession that we're waiting for, we might actually be waiting forever. And I have no direct connection or personal stories that I could attest to, the kind of things that my colleagues have heard. But you saw, a very, very infamous statement by Aung San Suu Kyi, and you would have to be surprised by the fact that she, addressed the kind of rape and the mass sexual violence against Rohingya women as fake rapes. So that tells you the sort of mentality that's, at play here in the larger, not just at the military level, but the government itself. So, like the gentleman in the back of the room said, we actually have problems with the structure, and the structure, when it's built by, patriarchy, obviously women would come second. Whatever question, whatever issues, whatever problems we face, from the structural problems, from the foundations that's, you know, shaky, there would be no way of us to find a resolution that actually would be sustainable. In terms of your question regarding the victim-centric approach to how to address it, I don't really have a solution for you, actually. But the only thing I could probably address is there are a lot of initiatives on the ground in the refugee camps. There are many, you know, women organizations that are coming up. How we involve them or how we address them, how we, you know, include them is going to be imperative to what is going to be our future in the resolution, in the reparation process, or whatever improvement that we could be making in the cases of Rohingya, and probably extend towards the ethnic nationalities as well. There are still a lot of the whitewashed approach to how, you know, we address victims. And then I try to, you know, refrain from using the word victims, but it's unfortunate that we have to use the term again, you know, just for the sake of understanding and for the sake of common knowledge. There are survivors, and these are two very, very different definitions of who they are as humans. These are women who actually took all their kids, in some cases, you know, 6, 7 children in their arms, crossing the borders to the other side of the country, crossing, you know, rivers that are deadly in some cases, and dealing with them in a, you know, in a way that look at them as a victimized person and a helpless person does not help in terms of, you know, improving their statuses or you know, involving them in the issue. One thing for sure that would actually help is, you know, maintaining and involving them in the decision-making process and actually hearing what they have to say, regardless of how we think their approach or their understanding of world is lacking. Because they themselves will have to live with that reality for the rest of their lives. So giving them the seat at the table but not listening to them is not an acceptable approach. Giving them, you know, giving one person or two person from, you know, different organizations that are probably controlled by a lot of patriarchal views, by a lot of men who are, you know, in control of these organizations would not help either. So having a diversified representatives of women themselves coming up and being placed in these tables, having a say in what decision is being made is going to be you know, crucial in how we involve and you know, ethically dealing with the survivors of sexual violence and genocide. I hope I addressed your question.
Okay, I don't. So because it's time already passed it too much, so I don't want to, you know, add more. But I just want to make clear the reason, the purpose of this, you know, 2 days conference. This is about the International Conference on Protection of Rohingya Survivors and Accountability for Genocide. The subtitle, as you see, the subtitle, it's Rape as a Weapon of Wars and Genocide, Past and Present in this region. So this gives us and the reason, I think that the reason why the first session, you know, we actually designated the voices from the Rohingya minority women is we need to listen more about, we need to start from the voice from the Rohingya women who has, you know, because the wartime, the crime, especially, you know, affect differently to women, because men as well, you know, suffered from the rape, gang rape, but the majority of, you know, victims and survivors are women. We need to listen from the voices from the women, and I'm very much thankful for your, you know, comprehensive, you know, analysis of the why women, you know, affect differently with men. And these swans, you know, I've been heard, you know, more than, you know, 15 years, how Swan, actively engaged and raised their voice in Asian regions. So thanks to the peace negotiation, I think it's very much important, or how to make the voice of women be listened. We can raise our voices, but if our voices not be heard, as you already mentioned, it's useless. And the peace negotiation with no voice heard from women's voices. So I think the situation would be repeated, just what happened before 50 years before in Korea and Japan, negotiation process. Comfort to women's issues was not there. So it took another 50 years for us to solve this problem. So I don't want to repeat what we did before So please keep, thank you. I don't want to, continue more. So thank you for the speakers and thank you for the audience. Yeah.